The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Los Lunas, New Mexico territory, startling the desert birds into flight as Silas Parker collapsed into the dirt. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading like spilled whiskey across the parched ground, while his killer, a well-known cattle baron, stood over him with a smoking revolver, his face twisted with satisfaction. "Thieving bastard got what he deserved," he announced to the gathering crowd, holstering his weapon with practiced ease. No one moved to help the dying man. No one dared cross Tyler McDougal. No one except for Scarlett Adams, who broke through the crowd with a desperate cry, dropping to her knees beside the fallen man. Her long copper hair fell forward as she cradled his head, heedless of the blood staining her simple blue dress. "Silas, stay with me," she begged, but his eyes had already grown vacant, his final breath escaping in a soft rattle. The year was 1878, and life in this harsh territory played by its own rules that rarely favored a woman alone. "Step away from him," McDougal commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who owned half the county. "That man was stealing cattle, my cattle." Scarlett looked up, her green eyes blazing through tears. "He wasn't stealing anything, he worked for you. He was collecting his wages after you refused to pay him for 3 months of honest work." McDougal's expression darkened. "You calling me a liar, girl?" The murmurs of the crowd grew louder as Scarlett rose to her feet, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I'm calling you a murderer." The crowd gasped. McDougal's hand twitched near his holster. "Watch your tongue, woman, or you'll find yourself in a world of trouble." "I'm already there," she replied, looking down at the body of her brother-in-law, the last connection to her dead sister, and the only family she had left in this world. Sheriff Woodson finally pushed through the gathering, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the scene. "What happened here, Tyler? Caught this thief trying to make off with one of my calves. He drew on me first," McDougal lied smoothly, knowing no one would contradict him. "That's not true," Scarlett protested. "Silas was unarmed." The sheriff barely glanced her way. "Madam, I suggest you mind your business. This here's a matter for the law." "The law," she spat. "What law protects a man like him?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself, Miss Adams. Your reputation's already hanging by a thread in this town." A murmur of agreement rippled through the onlookers. Since arriving in Los Lunas 18 months ago with her sister's child and no husband in sight, Scarlett had been the subject of whispers and judgment. Her sister had died in childbirth, leaving Scarlett to raise little Emma alone, a circumstance that had branded her with suspicion from the start. "Take the body to the undertaker," the sheriff instructed 2 bystanders. "And you, Miss Adams, best get on home. No good comes from stirring trouble." With one last look at Silas, Scarlett gathered her skirts and pushed back through the crowd. She could feel their eyes on her back, hear their whispers following her down the street. Shameless woman. Probably her bastard child. Always knew she was trouble. The walk home to her small cabin at the edge of town felt longer than usual, each step heavier than the last. How would she tell Emma that Uncle Silas wouldn't be coming back? How would they survive now without his help? At the thought of the child, Scarlett quickened her pace. Mrs. Holloway from the general store had agreed to watch Emma while Scarlett delivered lunch to Silas at the ranch. Now, returning empty-handed and heartbroken, she dreaded facing the old woman's judgment. The general store's bell jingled as Scarlett entered, finding Mrs. Holloway behind the counter, her face pinched with disapproval. 5-year-old Emma sat on a stool nearby, her small legs swinging as she carefully colored on a scrap of paper. "Mama." Emma looked up with a smile that made Scarlett's heart twist. The child had her mother's dark curls and her father's blue eyes, a father she would never know. "There you are," Mrs. Holloway said, her tone clipped. "Words already spreading about the commotion in town." Of course it was. Bad news traveled faster than a prairie fire in Las Lunas. "Thank you for watching her," Scarlett said, reaching for her coin purse. Mrs. Holloway waved away the offered payment. "Keep your money, you'll be needing it, I expect." Her expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry about Silas. He seemed a decent sort." Scarlett nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Decency, it seemed, was no protection in this town. "Come along, Emma," she said, extending her hand to the child. "Time to go home." As they walked hand in hand down the dusty street, Emma looked up at her with innocent curiosity. "Where's Uncle Silas, Mama? Is he coming for supper?" Scarlett swallowed hard. "Not today, sweetheart. Uncle Silas had to go away for a while." "Will he bring me a present when he comes back? He promised a wooden horse." The lump in Scarlett's throat grew painful. "We'll talk about it at home, darling." Their small cabin sat on the outskirts of town, a humble but tidy place that Scarlett had worked hard to make a home. She'd taken in laundry, mended clothing, sold eggs from their few chickens, anything to keep food on the table. Silas had helped when he could, bringing game from his hunts or extra supplies from the ranch. Without him, the future looked bleak. That evening, after tucking Emma into bed with a story and reassurances she didn't feel, Scarlett sat alone by the window, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tomorrow, she would need to be strong to figure out how they would survive. Tonight, she allowed herself to grieve, silent tears tracking down her cheeks as she contemplated the injustice of a world where men like MacDougall prospered while good men like Silas died in the dirt. A noise outside startled her from her thoughts, the distinctive sound of hooves approaching. Scarlett quickly wiped her tears and reached for the shotgun Silas had insisted she keep by the door. Visitors after dark rarely brought good news. She cracked the door open, peering into the gloom. A lone rider had stopped a respectful distance from the house, his silhouette backlit by the moon. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Name's Vincent Kelly, madam. I worked with Silas at the MacDougall Ranch." The man's voice was deep but gentle. "I've come to offer my condolences and some help if you'll accept it." Scarlett hesitated, her grip tightening on the shotgun. "Step into the light, Mr. Kelly." The rider dismounted and moved forward slowly, hands visible at his sides. The moonlight revealed a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that spoke of both hardship and kindness. His brown hair was a bit too long, curling slightly at the collar of his worn denim shirt. A cowboy hat hung down his back by its strap, and Scarlett could see he wore no gun, an unusual choice in these parts. "I know it's improper me calling at this hour," he said, stopping a respectful distance from the porch, "but I reckoned you might need these before morning." He gestured to a burlap sack tied to his saddle. "Some provisions, and Silas's personal effects from the bunkhouse." Scarlett lowered the shotgun slightly but didn't set it aside. "You worked with Silas," Vincent nodded. 2 years now. He was a good man. What happened today wasn't right." "No," she agreed softly. "It wasn't." An awkward silence stretched between them before Vincent cleared his throat. "I quit the ranch this afternoon. Couldn't stomach working for MacDougall after what he did." This surprised Scarlett. Jobs were scarce, and quitting one over principle was a luxury few could afford. "That was brave of you," he shrugged. "Not brave, just couldn't live with myself otherwise." He untied the sack and set it gently on the edge of the porch. "There's some coffee, flour, sugar," and Silas had a small pouch of coins hidden in his mattress. "It's all there." The unexpected kindness nearly undid her composure. "Thank you, Mr. Kelly, that's very decent of you." "Vince," he corrected with a gentle smile. "My friends call me Vince. I appreciate this." "Vince," she hesitated. Would you like to come in for coffee? It's the least I can offer." He shook his head. "Better not, madam. Your reputation's important, and a man calling this late wouldn't help matters." He glanced toward town. "This place loves its gossip almost as much as its liquor." Scarlett appreciated his consideration, even as she wanted to scoff at the idea that her reputation could sink any lower in the eyes of Las Lunas. "Perhaps another time, then." "I'll be around," he promised, stepping back toward his horse. "If you need anything at all, I'm staying at the livery for now, until I figure my next move." As he mounted up, Scarlett called after him. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Kelly? You don't even know me." He paused, silhouetted against the night sky. "Silas spoke of you often, of how you're raising your sister's child as your own after she passed. Said you were the strongest woman he'd ever known." He tipped his hat. "Folks like that deserve a helping hand now and again." With that, he rode off into the darkness, leaving Scarlett staring after him with the sack of provisions at her feet and a strange warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. The next morning brought reality crashing back. Scarlett took Emma to visit Silas at the undertaker's, explaining as gently as she could that Uncle Silas had gone to heaven to be with her mama. The child's tears broke Scarlett's heart all over again, but she remained strong, promising Emma that they would be all right. The funeral was a small, hurried affair. Few in town were willing to risk McDougal's displeasure by showing proper respect to Silas. Pastor William spoke perfunctory words over the grave, his discomfort evident as he rushed through the service. Only Mrs. Holloway, her husband, and surprisingly, Vincent Kelly stood with Scarlett and Emma as the simple pine box was lowered into the ground. As they walked away from the cemetery, Vincent fell into step beside them. In daylight, Scarlett could better see the man who had come to her aid the night before. He was handsome in a rugged way, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a strong jawline softened by a day's growth of beard. His clothes were clean but well worn, a working man's attire. "Thank you for coming," Scarlett said quietly, conscious of Emma's small hand in hers. "Least I could do," he replied. Silas was a friend. They walked in companionable silence until reaching the edge of town, where Vincent cleared his throat. "Miss Adams, I hope you don't mind my asking, but have you given thought to what you'll do now?" The question had haunted her all night. "Keep on as we have been, I suppose. I take in laundry, do some mending. We'll manage." Vincent frowned. "McDougal's a vengeful man. He won't like that you spoke against him publicly." "What would you have me do? Pretend he didn't murder an innocent man in cold blood?" "No, madam." "I admire your courage." He glanced down at Emma, who was watching a butterfly flit between wildflowers by the path. "But courage don't feed a child." The brutal truth of his words stung. "I'm aware of our situation, Mr. Kelly." "Vince," he reminded her gently. "Vince," she conceded. "And I'm Scarlett, not madam. I'm not yet old enough to be a madam." This brought a smile to his face. "Scarlett, then. I've got a proposition for you if you're willing to hear it." She raised an eyebrow, immediately wary, noting her expression. He quickly added, "A proper one." "Nothing untoward." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly seeming nervous. "I've been saving to buy a small spread outside of town. Nothing fancy, but good grazing land with a creek running through it. Silas was going to partner with me once he'd collected his back wages." That's why he confronted McDougal, Scarlett realized, the pieces falling into place. Vincent nodded. He was excited about it, said it would be a good place for Emma to grow up. He took a deep breath. "I still want to make that happen, but I need a partner. Someone to help with the investment and the work." Scarlett stared at him in disbelief. "Are you offering me Silas's place in this venture?" "Yes, Madam Scarlett. It wouldn't be charity," he added quickly. "It would be a proper business arrangement." I know you got some money from Silas, and I heard you own this cabin outright. If you sold it, combined with what I've saved, you want me to sell my home and go into business with a man I barely know." Scarlett couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. Vincent had the grace to look embarrassed. "When you put it that way, it does sound foolish. Forget I mentioned it." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Miss Adams." As he turned to leave, Emma suddenly spoke up. "Are you Uncle Silas's friend with the spotted horse?" Vincent stopped, looking down at the child with a gentle smile. "That's right, little lady. Name's Ranger. Uncle Silas said you can make a horse do tricks just by whispering to it," Emma continued, her eyes wide with wonder. "Not tricks exactly. Just understanding," Vincent explained, crouching down to her level. "Horses are smart creatures. They understand more than people think if you take the time to listen to them." "Could you teach me?" Emma asked eagerly. "Emma," Scarlett admonished gently, "Mr. Kelly is busy." "I wouldn't mind," Vincent said, his eyes meeting Scarlett's. "That is, if it's all right with your ma." Something in his gaze, a genuine warmth, an absence of judgment, made Scarlett hesitate. This man had shown them nothing but kindness. And unlike most in town, he seemed to see her as a person worthy of respect, not just a subject for gossip. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we should discuss your proposition further, Mr. Kelly. Not today, but soon." The smile that lit his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I'll be at the livery whenever you're ready to talk." After he left, Scarlett and Emma continued home, the child chattering excitedly about horses while Scarlett's mind raced with possibilities. The idea of leaving Las Lunas held undeniable appeal. This town had never welcomed them, had never been kind. But partnering with a man she barely knew, selling her only security, the risks were enormous. Yet as they approached their cabin, Scarlett noticed a crudely written note nailed to the door. She quickly pulled it down before Emma could see it, her blood running cold as she read the anonymous threat. "Loose women and their bastards ain't welcome here. Best move on before accidents happen." That night, after Emma was asleep, Scarlett sat at her small table with paper and pencil, calculating figures by lamplight. If she sold the cabin, combined with Silas's savings and her own meager funds, it might just be enough to partner in Vincent's venture. It would be a risk, but staying in Las Lunas was beginning to seem like the greater danger. The following morning, she dressed with particular care, putting on her best and only good dress, a modest blue cotton with white trim, after arranging for Mrs. Holloway to watch Emma for an hour. She made her way to the livery stable on the edge of town. She found Vincent brushing down a magnificent dappled gray horse, his sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He looked up at her approach, surprise and pleasure warming his features. "Miss Adams," he greeted, setting aside the brush. "Mr. Kelly," she replied formally, though her resolve wavered at the genuine welcome in his eyes. "I've come to discuss your proposition." He nodded, motioning to a bench outside the stable doors. "Would you care to sit? It's clean, I promise." Once seated, Scarlett came straight to the point. "How much land are you looking to buy?" 50 acres to start. "Old man Jennings is selling his place, has rheumatism so bad he can't work it anymore. Good water rights, decent grazing. The house needs work, but it's solid." "And the cost?" $800 for the land and house. Another $200 for cattle to start a small herd. Scarlett did some quick calculations in her head. "If I sell my cabin, I could contribute $400. With Silas's savings, that's just over $500. Vincent nodded. "I've got $500 saved. It would be enough to buy the land and a small starter herd. We'd be living lean for a while, but by next year we could be turning a profit." Scarlett repeated, testing the word. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Kelly?" A business partnership requires clear terms. Equal partners, he said without hesitation. Equal say in decisions, equal share of the work and profits. And living arrangements, she asked bluntly. I won't compromise my reputation or Emma's future. Vincent's face reddened slightly, but he met her gaze directly. The house has 3 bedrooms. You and Emma would have your privacy. I'd sleep in the bunkroom out back until proper arrangements could be made. And what would the town think of such an arrangement? The ranch is 15 miles outside Las Lunas, far enough that town gossip wouldn't reach, he pointed out. But to avoid any impropriety, we could be married. Scarlett stared at him, momentarily speechless. Married? Now Vincent looked truly uncomfortable, running a hand through his hair. A marriage of convenience is all I mean, for propriety's sake. For Emma, Mr. Kelly, we barely know each other. Marriage is quite a proposition. I know it sounds strange, he admitted, but it would be a partnership in the truest sense. I need someone I can trust, someone willing to work hard and build something worthwhile. Silas spoke highly of you, said you were the most determined woman he'd ever met. His expression grew serious. I'm not asking for anything beyond a working partnership. Your reputation would be protected and Emma would have a secure home. Scarlett studied him carefully. In her 24 years, she'd learned to read people, a necessary skill for survival. Vincent Kelly struck her as honest, his offer seemingly genuine. But marriage, even one in name only. I need time to consider, she finally said. Of course, he agreed readily. It's not a small decision. As she stood to leave, a commotion at the front of the livery caught their attention. Tyler McDougal dismounted from his horse, flanked by 2 of his ranch hands. His cold gaze fixed on Scarlett, then shifted to Vincent. Well, McDougal drawled. If it isn't the mouthy widow and my former hand, planning your next false accusation against me. Miss Adams isn't a widow, Mr. McDougal, Vincent corrected calmly, though Scarlett could see tension in his stance. And there was nothing false about what happened to Silas Parker. McDougal's face darkened. Careful, Kelly, you're walking a dangerous line. His gaze returned to Scarlett, running over her in a way that made her skin crawl. As for you, woman, you'd best watch that tongue of yours. Accidents happen to troublemakers in these parts. The threat wasn't subtle. Scarlett straightened her spine, refusing to show fear. Is that what happened to Silas? An accident? Silas Parker drew on me, McDougal growled. Everyone saw it. Everyone saw what you wanted them to see, Vincent interjected. Silas never carried a gun. He was collecting honest wages he'd earned. McDougal's hand moved to his holster. You calling me a liar, boy? Vincent stepped slightly in front of Scarlett. I'm saying the truth has a way of coming out sooner or later. For a tense moment, it seemed McDougal might draw his weapon. Then he laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You 2 are perfect for each other. A woman of loose morals and a man with no sense. He spat on the ground. Enjoy each other while you can. This territory has ways of cleansing itself of undesirables. With that ominous warning, he remounted his horse and rode off, his men following close behind. When they were gone, Scarlett released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That man is dangerous. Yes, Vincent agreed grimly, and he has the sheriff in his pocket. He turned to her, concern evident in his expression. This changes things, Scarlett. McDougal won't let this go, not after being challenged publicly. You and Emma aren't safe here. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. The note on her door hadn't been an idle threat. How soon could we leave for this ranch of yours? I can have the papers drawn up today, payment made tomorrow. We could leave by week's end. He hesitated. About the other matter. Scarlett made her decision quickly, survival instinct overriding caution. A marriage of convenience would be acceptable under the circumstances. for Emma's sake. The relief on Vincent's face was palpable. "I'll speak to Pastor Williams today. We can have a simple ceremony before we leave." As Scarlett walked back to retrieve Emma, her mind spun with the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. Marriage to a virtual stranger. Leaving the only home Emma had known. Starting over yet again. But when she remembered McDougal's threat and the hatred in his eyes, she knew they had no choice. Las Lunas had never truly been home, just a place they'd existed, tolerated but never welcomed. Perhaps with Vincent Kelly, they might find something better. The week passed in a flurry of activity. Scarlett sold her cabin to the blacksmith's family for a fair price, packed their meager belongings, and prepared Emma for the move. The child seemed more excited than apprehensive, particularly about the horses Vincent had promised she could help tend. True to his word, Vincent arranged everything efficiently. He purchased the Jennings property, procured a wagon for their belongings, and spoke to Pastor Williams about performing a simple ceremony. The pastor had initially balked, making his disapproval of Scarlett clear, but the proper documentation and a generous donation to the church building fund had eventually secured his cooperation. The morning of their departure dawned clear and cool, a perfect September day. Scarlett dressed Emma in her best frock, then donned her own blue dress, the same one she'd worn to discuss Vincent's proposition. It seemed fitting for a wedding, even one as pragmatic as theirs. The ceremony at the small church was brief and sparsely attended. Mrs. Holloway came, bringing a small cake as a wedding gift. The livery owner and his wife served as witnesses. Pastor Williams performed the necessary rites with minimal warmth, his disapproval evident in every clipped word. When he pronounced them man and wife, Vincent briefly touched Scarlett's hand, a gentle, reassuring gesture rather than a passionate one. There was no celebratory meal, no dancing, no traditional festivities. By noon, they were in the wagon heading out of Las Lunas, Emma seated between them, chattering excitedly about seeing their new home. Vincent drove the team with skill, while his spotted horse, Ranger, was tethered behind. No regrets. Vincent asked quietly once they'd left the town limits behind, glancing sideways at Scarlett. She considered the question seriously. "No," she finally answered. "Las Lunas held nothing for us but judgment and danger." She looked at him curiously. "What about you?" Having second thoughts about taking on a ready-made family, he shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "I always wanted a family, just never found the right circumstances until now." It was a diplomatic answer, and Scarlett appreciated his tact. This wasn't a love match, but perhaps it could become a friendship, a partnership based on mutual respect and common goals. The journey to the ranch took several hours, the wagon following a winding trail that led away from the main road. As the sun began its westward descent, Vincent pointed ahead to a ridge overlooking a small valley. "There it is, Clearwater Ranch." Scarlett followed his gaze and felt an unexpected surge of emotion. The setting was undeniably beautiful. The house sat on a gentle rise, with rolling pastureland spreading out before it and mountains rising in the distance. A creek more substantial than she'd expected curved through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods that glowed golden in the afternoon light. The house itself was modest but well built, a two-story structure with a wide porch and several outbuildings nearby. It needed paint and some repairs, but Scarlett could immediately see its potential. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "Home sweet home," Emma exclaimed, bouncing in her seat. "Can I see the horses now?" Vincent laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Let's get settled first, little lady. Plenty of time for horses tomorrow." As they pulled up to the house, Vincent helped them down from the wagon with gentle courtesy. Emma immediately ran to explore the porch while Scarlett stood taking in what was now her home. "It needs work," Vincent acknowledged, following her gaze. "But the roof's sound, and the well gives good water year-round." "It's far better than I expected," Scarlett admitted. "How long has it been empty?" "About 6 months. Jennings moved to Santa Fe to live with his daughter after his wife passed." He hesitated. "I should probably carry you across the threshold or some such thing." Scarlett felt her cheeks warm. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Kelly." "Vincent," he corrected. "Or Vince. Seems strange for my wife to call me Mr. Kelly." The word wife sounded foreign to her ears. "Vincent, then," she agreed, starting toward the house. "Let's see what we have to work with." The interior was dusty but otherwise in good condition. The main floor contained a kitchen with a large cookstove, a comfortable sitting room with a stone fireplace, and a small study. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, a master, and 2 smaller rooms along with a washroom that boasted a large copper tub. That was Mrs. Jennings's pride and joy, Vincent explained, nodding to the tub. Had it shipped all the way from St. Louis, according to local gossip. Scarlett ran her hand along the smooth copper edge. Such a luxury had been unimaginable in her small cabin. "It's wonderful." They agreed that Scarlett and Emma would take the 2 smaller bedrooms, while Vincent would use the bunkhouse behind the main house. It was a practical arrangement that preserved propriety while acknowledging the unusual nature of their marriage. That evening, after a simple supper of beans and biscuits that Vincent prepared with surprising competence, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Emma had fallen asleep on a quilt inside, exhausted from the day's excitement. "Thank you," Scarlett said quietly, breaking the companionable silence, "for all of this." Vincent nodded, his profile illuminated by the fading light. "No need for thanks. It's a fair arrangement for us both. Still, it was a risk for you. Taking on a woman with a questionable reputation and a child not her own." He turned to look at her directly, his expression serious. "There's nothing questionable about protecting your sister's child, Scarlett. What you've done for Emma, it's admirable. Most would have sent her to an orphanage." "She's all I have left of Rebecca," Scarlett said softly. "My sister was everything to me when she died." She swallowed hard, the memory still painful after 5 years. "Emma was all I had left." "What happened to her father?" Vincent asked carefully. Scarlett's expression hardened. "He left when Rebecca told him she was expecting. A traveling salesman passing through full of promises he never intended to keep." Vincent nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Explains why folks in town jump to conclusions about you." "People see what they want to see," Scarlett replied. "A young, unmarried woman with a child. Easier to assume the worst than learn the truth. And your parents, gone. Influenza took them both when I was 16 and Rebecca 18. We managed on our own after that, until she met Emma's father." Scarlett looked out at the darkening landscape. "What about your family?" Vincent leaned back in his chair. "Pa was a rancher in Colorado, taught me everything I know about cattle and horses. Ma died when I was 12, fall from a horse. Pa followed 5 years ago, heart gave out while breaking a new stallion." A faint smile touched his lips. "He went the way he would have wanted at least." "No siblings?" "A brother, 2 years younger, went east for schooling and never came back. Last I heard, he was practicing law in Boston." Vincent shrugged. "We write at Christmas, but that's about the extent of it." They fell silent again, the chirping of crickets filling the night air. Scarlett found herself studying Vincent's profile, the strong jawline, the straight nose, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He was undeniably handsome in a rugged, unpolished way. More importantly, he seemed genuinely kind, a quality far rarer than good looks in this harsh territory. "We should turn in," Vincent said eventually, rising from his chair. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Need to start getting this place in proper order." Scarlett nodded, suddenly conscious of the awkwardness of their situation. They were legally married but effectively strangers. "Good night, then." As she turned to go inside, Vincent spoke again. "Scarlett." When she looked back, he continued, "I know this isn't a conventional marriage, but I want you to know I'll do right by you and Emma. You have my word on that." The simple sincerity in his voice touched her. "I believe you, Vincent." That night, lying in her new bedroom with Emma sleeping peacefully in the adjoining room, Scarlett stared at the unfamiliar ceiling and considered the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, she'd been a struggling laundress in a town that despised her. Now she was a rancher's wife with a home of her own and 50 acres of New Mexico territory to help tame. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself as a girl, but as she listened to the soothing sound of the creek through her open window, she found herself cautiously hopeful for the first time in years. The following weeks fell into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. Each morning, Vincent rose before dawn to tend the small herd of cattle he'd purchased, while Scarlett prepared breakfast and got Emma ready for the day. They worked separately through the morning, Vincent on outside chores, Scarlett turning the neglected house into a home. They would meet for a midday meal, then often work together on larger projects in the afternoon. Emma flourished in the open spaces of the ranch, following Vincent around like an eager shadow whenever he would allow it. True to his word, he began teaching her about horses, showing incredible patience as he guided her through basic care and handling. The child's delight when he first helped her sit atop his gentle mare was a sight that warmed Scarlett's heart. Despite the practical nature of their arrangement, Scarlett found herself growing increasingly comfortable in Vincent's company. He was unfailingly respectful, never presuming upon their marital status, yet he treated her as a true partner in their venture. He sought her opinion on ranch matters, listened attentively to her ideas, and shared the decision-making equally as promised. Slowly, the ranch began to take shape under their combined efforts. Vincent repaired fences and outbuildings, while Scarlett transformed the dusty, neglected rooms into clean, comfortable living spaces. They planted a small vegetable garden, repaired the chicken coop, and added 2 milk cows to their livestock. On Sundays, Vincent would hitch the wagon and drive them to the small church in Peralta, a neighboring town where they were unknown and could worship without judgment. It was on one such Sunday in late October that they encountered Tyler McDougal for the first time since leaving Las Lunas. They had stopped at the general store after services to purchase supplies when McDougal entered with 2 of his men. His eyes narrowed when he spotted them, a cruel smile spreading across his face as he approached. "Well, if it isn't the happy couple," he drawled. "Heard you 2 got hitched and ran off to play rancher." His gaze swept dismissively over Scarlett. "Tell me, Kelly, did you know what you were getting when you took her on? Woman with her reputation." Vincent stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "You're speaking about my wife, McDougal." "I suggest you mind your manners," McDougal laughed. "Wife, is that what you call it? Everyone knows what she really is." Vincent's hands clenched at his sides, but before he could respond, Emma emerged from behind a display of fabric, running to Scarlett's side. "Mama, look at the pretty ribbons." McDougal's eyes narrowed as he studied the child. "So that's the bastard everyone talks about. Got your looks, doesn't she, Scarlett? Or did you steal this one too?" Something snapped in Scarlett at the cruel insinuation. "That's enough," she hissed, pushing Emma behind her. "You can say what you want about me, but leave my child out of it." "Your child?" McDougal raised an eyebrow. "Funny, I heard a different story." "You heard gossip and lies," Vincent interjected, his voice dangerously calm. "Now I suggest you move along before this gets unpleasant." McDougal's hand moved to his gun belt. "Is that a threat, Kelly? Because I'd be happy to finish what I started with your friend Silas." The store had gone silent, other customers backing away from the confrontation. Scarlett felt fear coil in her stomach, not for herself, but for Vincent and Emma. She placed a restraining hand on Vincent's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "He's not worth it," she said quietly. "Please, Vincent, for Emma's sake." After a moment, Vincent nodded, though his eyes never left McDougal's. "We'll be on our way. Our business here is done." McDougal smirked. "Running away again. Seems to be a habit with you two." "Being sensible isn't running away," Vincent replied evenly. "But remember this, McDougal, I'm not Silas Parker. If you come after my family, you'll find I'm not so easily bullied." With that, he placed a protective arm around Scarlett and Emma, guiding them toward the door after paying for their purchases. Scarlett could feel McDougal's eyes boring into her back as they left, his malice palpable even from a distance. The ride home was quiet, the encounter having cast a shadow over their otherwise pleasant day. Once Emma was occupied with her new hair ribbons, Scarlett turned to Vincent as he drove the wagon. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "My past continues to cause problems." Vincent shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for. McDougal is a bully and a murderer. His opinion matters less than dirt to me. Still, he's dangerous, what he did to Silas." "I won't let him harm you or Emma," Vincent said firmly. "That's a promise." The conviction in his voice should have reassured her, but Scarlett couldn't shake the feeling that McDougal's appearance was no coincidence. The man had a reputation for holding grudges, and their public defiance of him had clearly rankled. Her concerns proved justified the following week, when one of their calves was found dead near the property line, its throat cut in a way no predator would have done. Vincent said nothing as he buried the animal, but his expression was grim, his movements tense with suppressed anger. That night, after Emma was asleep, he cleaned his rifle at the kitchen table, his face set in determined lines. "It was him, wasn't it?" Scarlett asked, watching from the doorway. Vincent nodded. "A warning. He wants us to know he can reach us even out here. What are we going to do?" Setting the rifle aside, Vincent gestured for her to join him at the table. When she sat, he took her hands in his, the first time he'd initiated such contact since their wedding day. "I need to go to Santa Fe," he said. "There's a federal marshal there who isn't in McDougal's pocket. Silas wasn't the first man McDougal's killed, but if we can get someone to investigate properly, he might be the last." Fear clutched at Scarlett's heart. "How long would you be gone?" 4 days, maybe 5. The journey there and back, plus time to speak with the marshal and give a formal statement. His hands tightened around hers. "I don't like leaving you and Emma alone, but this might be our only chance to see justice done." Scarlett wanted to protest, to beg him not to leave them, but she understood the importance of what he was proposing. If McDougal remained unchallenged, they would never truly be safe. "When would you go?" she asked instead. "Tomorrow at first light." "The sooner I get there, the sooner I can return." He hesitated. "Will you be all right? I can show you how to use the rifle before I go." Scarlett squared her shoulders. "I know how to shoot, Vincent. Silas taught me." She managed a small smile. "We'll be fine, just come back safely." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "I will," he promised. "Nothing could keep me from coming back to you." The words hung between them, weighted with more meaning than either had intended. For a moment, Scarlett thought he might lean forward, might cross the careful boundary they'd maintained these past weeks. Instead, he gently released her hands and stood. "I should pack a few things," he said, his voice slightly rough. "And check on Ranger. He'll need to be fresh for the journey. As he left the kitchen, Scarlett remained at the table, her hands still warm from his touch, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm in her chest. This arrangement between them had been practical, sensible, a matter of mutual convenience and protection. When had it begun to feel like something more? The realization that she would miss him, truly miss him, not just fear for their safety in his absence, caught her by surprise. Somehow, in the midst of building fences and planting gardens and establishing their ranch, Vincent Kelly had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Dawn came too quickly. Scarlett rose before the sun, preparing a hearty breakfast and packing provisions for Vincent's journey. He joined her in the kitchen as the first light crept through the windows, dressed for travel with his saddlebags over his shoulder. "You didn't need to get up so early," he said, setting his bags by the door. "Of course I did. Can't send my husband off without a proper meal." The word husband still felt strange on her tongue, but less foreign than before. They ate in companionable silence, both aware of the dangers his mission entailed but unwilling to speak them aloud. When he'd finished, Vincent checked his pistol and secured it in his holster, the first time Scarlett had seen him armed since their wedding day. "The rifle's loaded and by the door," he told her, rising from the table. "Keep it close, and don't hesitate to use it if trouble comes." Scarlett nodded, walking with him to where Ranger waited, saddled and ready. The morning air was crisp, the first hint of winter carried on the breeze. "Be careful," she said as he adjusted the saddle. "MacDougal has friends everywhere." "I'll keep my wits about me," he promised, turning to face her. For a moment he seemed uncertain, as if wrestling with some internal debate. Then, with gentle determination, he stepped forward and kissed her cheek, a brief, tender gesture that left her skin tingling. "Take care of our home," he said softly. "I'll be back before you know it." With that, he mounted Ranger and rode off, pausing at the crest of the hill to wave back at her. Scarlett stood watching until horse and rider disappeared from view, her hand unconsciously touching the spot where his lips had brushed her skin. The first day passed uneventfully. Scarlett kept Emma busy with chores and lessons, trying to maintain their normal routine despite the hollow feeling left by Vincent's absence. That night, she checked the doors and windows twice before retiring, the rifle propped beside her bed as she lay awake listening to the night sounds of the ranch. The second day brought visitors, a neighboring rancher and his wife who'd heard about the newcomers and came to introduce themselves. The Hendersons were an older couple, friendly and unpretentious, who offered assistance should Scarlett need anything while Vincent was away. Their kindness was a welcome reminder that not everyone in the territory shared MacDougal's malice. On the third day, Emma came down with a slight fever. Nothing serious, but enough to keep Scarlett distracted and occupied as she tended to the child with cool compresses and herbal teas. By nightfall, the fever had broken, but Scarlett was exhausted, falling into bed without her usual vigilant check of the property. She woke to the smell of smoke. For a disoriented moment, she thought she'd left something on the stove. Then reality crashed in as she registered the acrid scent and saw the orange glow through her window. Something outside was burning. Scarlett grabbed the rifle and ran to Emma's room, finding the child still sleeping peacefully. "Emma, wake up," she urged, shaking the girl gently. "We need to go outside." "Why, Mama?" Emma asked groggily, rubbing her eyes. "There's a fire, sweetheart. We need to make sure it doesn't reach the house." She helped Emma into her coat and shoes, then guided her downstairs and onto the porch. The source of the fire was immediately apparent. The barn was ablaze, flames licking up its wooden walls and reaching toward the night sky. Scarlett's heart pounded with fear and rage. This was no accident, not with Vincent away and the timing too perfect to be coincidence. "Stay on the porch," she instructed Emma firmly. "Don't move from this spot." With the rifle in hand, Scarlett moved cautiously toward the burning structure, scanning the darkness for any sign of intruders. The animals had already fled. The 2 horses they'd acquired since settling the ranch were running loose in the pasture, frightened by the fire. As she approached the burning barn, a movement at the edge of her vision made her spin around, raising the rifle. A shadowy figure emerged from behind the bunkhouse, the glint of a gun barrel visible in the firelight. "Should have listened to the warning," a man's voice called, not McDougal, but one of his hands she recognized from town. "Boss doesn't like being defied." "Get off our land," Scarlett demanded, keeping the rifle steady despite her fear. The man laughed. "Or what? You'll shoot me." "Don't think you have the stomach for it, woman." "Try me," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've got nothing to lose by protecting what's mine." Another figure emerged from the shadows, a second man, moving toward the house where Emma waited on the porch. Panic surged through Scarlett as she realized the terrible choice before her: keep her weapon trained on the first threat, or turn to protect her child. "Emma, get inside," she screamed, swinging the rifle toward the second intruder. The momentary distraction was all the first man needed. Pain exploded in Scarlett's shoulder as his bullet found its mark, the impact sending her staggering backward. She managed to keep her grip on the rifle, firing blindly in the direction of the second man as she fell. Through a haze of pain, she saw Emma run into the house as instructed. Thank God for that small mercy. Scarlett tried to rise, knowing she needed to reach the child to protect her, but her injured arm wouldn't support her weight. "Shouldn't have tried to be brave," the first man said, approaching with his gun still drawn. "Now we'll have to do this the hard way." A shot rang out, but not from the intruder's gun. The man jerked backward, a look of surprise crossing his face before he crumpled to the ground. Scarlett turned her head to see the second man similarly fallen near the porch. And there, silhouetted against the burning barn, was Vincent atop Ranger, his rifle still raised and smoking in the night air. "Scarlett," he called, dismounting in one fluid motion and running to her side. "My God, you're hit." "Emma," she managed, the pain making it difficult to speak. "Check on Emma." "She's inside, she's safe," he assured her, examining her wound with gentle hands. "It's a clean shot through the muscle. You'll be all right, but we need to stop the bleeding." Scarlett nodded, relief washing over her as the immediate danger passed. "You came back early." "Got a bad feeling," Vincent explained, tearing a strip from his shirt to bind her wound. "Something told me I needed to be home. Thank God I listened." His face was grim as he worked. "McDougal, his men," she confirmed. "The barn can be rebuilt," Vincent finished firmly. "You and Emma are what matter." Once her wound was temporarily bandaged, Vincent helped her to her feet. "Can you walk to the house?" Scarlett nodded, leaning heavily on his support as they made their way toward the porch. Emma burst through the door as they approached, her face streaked with tears. "Mama, you're hurt," she cried, running to them. "I'm all right, sweetheart," Scarlett assured her, though the pain in her shoulder suggested otherwise. "Mr. Kelly came home just in time." "Papa saved us," Emma declared, using the title she'd adopted for Vincent in recent weeks, a development that had surprised and touched them both. Vincent gathered the child against his side with his free arm, holding both his girls close as they entered the house. "Let's get your mama fixed up, and then we'll talk about what happens next." What happened next was not what any of them expected. After treating Scarlett's wound, which was painful but not life-threatening, Vincent rode to fetch Dr. Mitchell from Peralta and, more significantly, the federal marshal who had returned with him from Santa Fe. Marshal James Thorpe was a formidable presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with a no-nonsense demeanor that suggested he'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and remained undaunted. He listened carefully as Vincent and Scarlett recounted the night's events and the history with MacDougall. "These men worked for him?" the marshal asked, examining the bodies Vincent had dragged away from the house. "Yes, sir," Vincent confirmed. "Been on his payroll for years." Marshal Thorpe nodded grimly. "This, combined with your statement about Silas Parker's murder and the statements I've gathered from others, should be enough to bring MacDougall in." He looked up at the smoldering remains of the barn. "Attempted murder, arson, serious charges, even for a man with his connections." "Will it be enough?" Scarlett asked, her arm carefully bandaged and resting in a sling Dr. Mitchell had fashioned. "He's evaded consequences for so long." "Times are changing, madam," the marshal replied. "The territory's pushing for statehood. That means cleaning up the old ways of doing business." He replaced his hat with determination. "I'll ride for Las Lunas tonight with my deputies. MacDougall will be in custody by morning." True to his word, MacDougall was arrested the following day, though not without resistance that left one deputy wounded and MacDougall himself with a bullet in his leg. The cattle baron was transported to Santa Fe to await trial, his protests and threats falling on deaf ears in the face of the marshal's evidence. For Scarlett and Vincent, the immediate danger had passed, but recovery would take time. The barn would need rebuilding, Scarlett's injury required weeks of healing, and the emotional aftermath of the attack left them all shaken. Yet something fundamental had shifted between them. The night of the fire had burned away the careful boundaries they'd maintained, revealing the depth of feeling that had grown beneath the surface of their practical arrangement. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a habit that had become precious to them, both Vincent finally gave voice to what had been unspoken between them. "When I rode over that hill and saw the barn on fire, heard the gunshots." He paused, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never been more scared in my life, Scarlett. The thought of losing you and Emma, it nearly stopped my heart." Scarlett turned to look at him, seeing in his eyes the same warmth that had been growing in her own heart. "We're still here," she said softly. "Thanks to you." "No," he corrected, reaching for her hand. "Thanks to you. You stood your ground, protected Emma. You're the bravest woman I've ever known." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm that had nothing to do with her healing wound. "This marriage of ours," he continued carefully, "it started as a practical arrangement, a partnership." "It did," she agreed, her heart beating faster. "I find myself wanting more than that now," he admitted, his eyes holding hers. "If you'll have me not just as a partner, but as a true husband. A family, the three of us for real." Scarlett felt tears prick at her eyes, not of sadness, but of a joy so unexpected and complete that it overwhelmed her. "I think we've been becoming a real family all along," she whispered. "I just didn't realize it until I nearly lost you." Vincent's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. With infinite tenderness, he leaned forward and kissed her, their first true kiss, sweet and gentle and full of promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Scarlett Kelly. You and Emma both." "And we love you," she replied, her heart too full for elaborate declarations. The simple truth was enough. That night, for the first time, Vincent didn't return to the bunkhouse but joined Scarlett in their home, in their bed, as a true husband. Their coming together was tender and passionate, a culmination of the trust and affection that had grown between them over the months of working side by side, building a life neither had expected to find. As winter settled over Clearwater Ranch, bringing crisp mornings and cozy evenings by the fire, the small family found their rhythm. The new barn rose slowly but steadily, neighbors coming to help with the raising once word spread of what had happened. Emma thrived, growing more confident each day under the loving guidance of both parents. McDougal's trial came in the spring, a sensation that drew spectators from across the territory. Scarlett testified about Silas's murder, her head held high despite the whispers that still followed her. Vincent stood beside her, his quiet strength a constant support as they faced down the man who had threatened everything they held dear. Justice, when it came, was sweeter than either had dared hope. McDougal was convicted not only of Silas's murder, but of the attempted murder of Scarlett and the destruction of their property. The sentence was harsh, 20 years in the territorial prison, which, for a man of his age and poor health, amounted to a life sentence. As they left the courthouse, Scarlett felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a burden she'd carried since that fateful day when Silas had fallen in the dust of Las Lunas. "It's really over," she said wonderingly as Vincent helped her into the wagon where Emma waited, playing with a doll Vincent had carved for her birthday. "A new beginning," he corrected, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "For all of us." The journey home to Clearwater Ranch was filled with plans and dreams, adding to their herd, expanding the house, perhaps even building a proper schoolroom for Emma and the other children they both hoped would follow. The land that had once been just a business proposition had become truly theirs, a home built on trust, respect, and love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. 5 years later, Clearwater Ranch had prospered beyond their initial hopes. The small herd had grown substantial. The house had expanded to accommodate their growing family. Emma, now 10, had been joined by a brother, Thomas, aged 3, and a new baby sister, Rebecca, named for Scarlett's beloved sister. On a warm summer evening, as the children played in the yard under the watchful eye of their hired help, a young married couple who lived in the renovated bunkhouse, Scarlett and Vincent, sat on their porch swing, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked suddenly. Marrying a stranger, taking such a risk. Scarlett looked up at him, this man who had become the center of her world, and smiled. "Not for a single moment," she answered truthfully. "Some strangers are worth believing in." He leaned down to kiss her, still with the same tenderness that made her heart flutter after all these years. "I believed in you from the first moment I saw you standing up to McDougal in town," he confessed. "A lone woman against the most powerful man for 100 miles. I knew then you were something special." "And I thought you were a fool," she laughed, remembering their first encounters. "A cowboy with principles in a land where such things seemed like luxury." "Perhaps I was," he agreed, his arm tightening around her. "But being a fool for you has made me the happiest man in the territory." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold, Scarlett reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate widow falsely accused to a woman standing proudly beside the man who had believed in her, when no one else would, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Clearwater Ranch had become everything they'd hoped for and more, not just a successful business, but a true home where love and trust flourished, where the past's shadows had no power over the brightness of their future together. And it had all begun with a single moment of courage when a strange woman with a child was called wicked, and a cowboy stood up and said, "I believe her."